So when we're talking about circles and we talk about the distance all the way around a circle, this is called circumference. So if I'm asking you to find the circumference, I'm asking you to figure out how long, if I stretched out the whole circle, how long would that be? Or how much is it all the way around? The circumference of a circle, the formula I normally use is 2 pi r. 2 pi times the radius. Now, some of you maybe have heard pi d. If you would rather do pi d, that is okay. It depends on if you're given the diameter or given the radius. Some of you, I think, maybe know a mnemonic or something that helps you remember the pi d. And if you want to do it that way, that's okay. 2 pi r is how I'm going to do it, but do it whichever way makes sense to you. So, let's say we have an example here. Find the circumference of a circle with a radius of 9. Okay? If I know that the circumference is 2 pi r, and I'm going to let the radius be 9, then I'm just going to put a 9 where the r goes. And then you just multiply the 2 times the 9, and you get 18 pi. You can leave it as 18 pi, or you can find in Desmos that answer. So pi is one of your, down here in the formulas, it is, where can I find it? Oh, right here. So if it wanted a decimal, you would put 18 and then just press pi right there. So 56.55 if you needed to find out the decimal. And it just depends on the problem. Sometimes it'll be written this way and sometimes it'll be written this way. I think that was right, 56.55, let's make sure, yeah. Okay, the next one, again, it says find the circumference of a circle with a diameter of 5. So it was different here because it says diameter. I'm still going to use that 2 pi r formula because that's just what I'm used to. But I do need to figure out what r is. Okay? If the diameter is 5, then that means r is half of 5. So that means r is 2.5, and so 2.5 would go right here. We can multiply 2.5 times 2, and you get 5, or 5 pi. And then if we wanted that decimal, we could come here and put 5 pi, you get 15.7. Again, whichever way that the problem might be written. And if it's not written either way and it just asks you, I don't care which way you write it. Whichever way makes sense. Okay, next. This one's different because it doesn't ask me the circumference. This one asks me what the radius is. Okay? So find the radius of a circle with a circumference of 26. We're still going to use that same formula. Circumference equals 2 pi r. But this time we're solving for r. Okay? 26 has to go in the place of c for the circumference. So you have 26 equals 2 pi r. You're looking for r. So what you do is you divide both sides by the 2 pi. So you divide both sides by 2 pi like this. That will give you r. 26 divided by 2 pi. When you put that in Desmos, just make sure that the pi is down there with the 2. If it does it separately, then it wouldn't be correct. That tells me that the r is 4.14. So finding the radius is not difficult as long as you know the formula. You're just sort of working backwards. Number 4 says find the diameter. So very similar kind of question. When we get the radius, we're just going to multiply it by 2 to find the diameter. Okay, so if we get circumference equals 2 pi r, we're going to plug in the circumference of 16. We're going to divide by 2 pi. Be careful and don't just say, oh, that's 8 pi, because the pi's on the bottom, so it's not just 8 pi. You actually have to like figure that out. 16 divided by 2 pi. So 16 divided by 2 pi is 2.54. That's what the radius is, but what do I have to do to figure out the final answer? I've got to multiply that by 2 to figure out the diameter. You could put a parenthesis in front of it and multiply it by 2 like that if you wanted. Or you could put that answer choice, you know, and then multiply by 2. But it looks like the diameter is going to be 5.09. I'm going to write that down. Let me go back and write down what that radius was, 2.54. So the radius was 2.54, and then we multiplied it by 2, we got 5.09. So just be careful whatever it's asking for, if it's asking for the diameter or the radius when you're finding it. Now, a part of the circumference is called arc length. So a portion of the circumference is called arc length. And I'll show you what that means. So circumference is like all the way around a circle, right? Well, if I just want to figure out, instead of all the way around, if I just want to figure out like a part of it, that's what arc length is. And so that's what this picture right here is representing. So if I wanted to figure out like what AB was and not all the way around, that would be arc length. Okay? And so there's formulas, there's all these kinds of things. What I normally do is I figure out the circumference, and then I figure out what the angle is and multiply by the angle over 360 because it's just a portion of it. So it's like a fraction of it, so we're just going to multiply by the fraction. So here's what I mean. Okay? So it says find the arc length. Well, let's think about the circumference first, because you can do that. The circumference is 2 pi times r. Well, again, to figure out the part that we need, we take the angle that it gives us, which is 60, and we divide it by 360, because this is the fraction of the circle that you're looking for. So 2 pi times 8 is the circumference, and then you multiply by the fraction of the angle. Okay? Alright, so let's figure out how we do that in Desmos. So I'm going to make this smaller so we can see both at the same time. Okay, so in Desmos, we're going to put in 2 pi and then times 8. And then you can go ahead and put in 60 divided by 360. And it kind of puts it all together. That's okay. It works out well. But you can do it just like that. And so that tells me that the arc length equals 8.37 or 8.38. So you find the circumference, and then you multiply by the fraction of the angle that it gives us. Okay? All right, I'm going to let you try number 6. Number 6 is just a tad bit different because they gave me the diameter. They didn't give me the radius. The radius here was 8. Okay? So how do I find the radius on a problem like this one? Yep, I need to divide that by 2 first to get the radius, and then I'll do the same sort of thing. So try that, see how it works. Alright, so we do the circumference. So we're going to do 2 pi and r. Alright, the whole thing is 9. So the diameter is 9. So I'm going to take half of 9, which is 4.5, to give me the r. And then I multiply by the angle, because that tells me how much of the circle that I'm interested in. So you get 75 over 360. And so if I put that in here, I'll have 2 pi times 4.5 divided by 360. Oops, I forgot the 75. So times 75 divided by 360. Notice that's how you can make it look like just 75 over 360 without the parentheses, but you can do it the other way too, it doesn't matter. And so you get 5.89, and that is in terms of yards. Alright, so 7 and 8 are the same exact thing, except it's words and not a picture. And also, they gave us an angle in terms of radians. Okay? So one thing you can do is you can change the angle to degrees, and then try to solve it. Or, instead of just doing the angle over 360, we can do the angle over 2 pi, because 2 pi represents 360. We know that already. And so what we can do is we can just do the same thing and then divide our angle by 2 pi. So on number 7, we would have 2 pi r, okay? And then our angle is 4 pi over 3, so we're going to put 4 pi over 3 and then over 2 pi. That looks really, really complicated. Okay? But again, we're just going to put it all in Desmos, so we're just going to let the calculator work it out for us. Just don't get confused by all the dividing and all of that kind of thing. Okay? So 2 pi times 5 times 4 pi over 3 divided by 2 pi. So it looks really strange in Desmos, but that's how you put it in. Okay? And then you just get 20.94. Okay, so we know it's 2 pi and r, so half of the 10. And then we put our angle divided by 2 pi. So your angle always goes over either 2 pi or 360, just depending on if you have radians or degrees. So 2 pi times 5 times pi over 6 divided by another 2 pi. And you get 103.35. Alright, so this whole side of the notes, we were finding circumference, which is like perimeter all the way around. Or we found arc length, which is just like a portion of the circle. Okay, the other thing that we have to find is area. Okay? And area represents, like when you're looking at a circle, you're talking about like inside the circle, how much of the circle is covered. Okay? So area of a circle is pi r squared. That's the formula for the area. So arc length and circumference is 2 pi r, but when you're talking about area, you have to use pi r squared. Okay, so find the area of a circle whose radius is 2.5 centimeters. Then we know that we're just going to put it into that formula. We've got pi 2.5 squared. And again, you've probably seen this formula before, but we're going to relate it to Math 3 in just a minute when we find a portion of the circle instead of all the circle. Alright, so in this case you get 19.63 as far as the area goes. When they tell you the units for radius, just so you know that the area units are squared. So just in case you see something like that, you might need to know that those units are squared when you're finding area. Another way that this problem could have been written, or the answer could be written, you could do 2.5 squared and get 6.25. So it's possible that you might see 6.25 pi. And I just want you to see both of those because, you know, you're going to be doing multiple choice and it might be written both ways. So that's the two ways that you might see that one written. Okay, next it says find the area of a circle whose diameter is 16. Same kind of problem, except they gave us the diameter instead of the radius. So we just divide that by 2. So if the diameter is 16, we know that the radius is 8. Again, you can square that and then multiply it by pi. Or it might be written as a decimal. And so we can put 64 pi in there, and you get 201. And again, if we need the units, it would be centimeters squared. So instead of area, what if it says, here's the area, but let's find the radius? We do that similarly to how we did the other side when we were looking for the radius. We just plug in the formula. If the area is 113.1, then we've got pi times r squared, and we're looking for r. So what you do first is you divide by pi. So you'll have 113.1 divided by pi, which is 36 roughly. It's a bunch of zeros, so if you just want to put the zeros, you can. And then you want to take the square root of that. Now, you want to try to take the square root of as much of the decimals as you can, because sometimes it might round it differently, but because there are so many zeros, it's going to come out pretty close. And so you take the square root after that, and so r is 6. Okay, number 12. Find the diameter of a circle whose area is 201.06. So if the area is 201.06, I know that's equal to pi r squared. So I'm going to divide by pi first to get the r squared. And some of you had kind of rounded it, and it'll be okay to do that. Just be really careful, because sometimes it might round it strangely. So 63.999. We're going to take the square root of that, and if you want it to be exact, you want to put in as many decimals as you can. So r squared was like 63.999, and r was like 7.999, which is basically 8, right? And then if I want to find the diameter, which is what the problem was asking for, I'm going to multiply that by 2, and you do get roughly 16. Alright, so that was area. You know, on the other side we found circumference, and then we found arc length, which was a portion of the area, or a portion of the circumference. You're going to do the same thing here. This is area, and now we want to find a portion of the area. And that's called, and it looks like this, like instead of like all of it shaded, just part of it shaded, and part of it shaded, and part of it shaded. Okay? And so, it's called a sector. So a sector is the region bounded by two radii of the circle and their intersected arc. But basically, it's this shaded part. So it's part of the area, it's just not the whole thing. Okay? And it's very similar to how we did the arc length. We find the area, which is pi r squared, but then you multiply by the angle and divide it by either 360 or 2 pi, depending on the kind of angle that it gives you. Okay, so let's do an example, and then we'll see if you've got it. I bet you will. Alright, so here's our problem, and I want to find the area of the sector, which is that whole shaded area. Okay, so I'm going to have pi r squared. Okay, my angle's 285, so I'm going to do 285, and then divide it by 360 because I'm in degrees. So same as we did on the other side. It's just in terms of area instead of arc length. So, in Desmos, it'll be pi, and then 9 squared. You can put the times in between there. I know sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. And then 285 divided by 360. Probably need a times right there. Oops, there we go. And so that would be the area of that part of the circle, which is called the sector. So 201.45. So that's the area of that sector. Alright, so it'll be pi, our r is 6, so 6 squared. Our angle is 150, so 150 over 360. Put that in. Maybe this time I can put it in correctly. Pi times 6 squared times 150 divided by 360. And so for that sector, I get 47.12. Okay, last two examples are exactly the same thing, except our angles are in radians. Okay, So on number 15, I'm going to do pi r squared. I'm going to put my angle, pi over 8, but instead of dividing by 360, we divide by 2 pi because we know that 2 pi represents 360. And again, put all of that in Desmos. I'm so thankful that we have Desmos so that we can see what we're putting it in. Alright, times pi over 8, and then divided by 2, and then another pi. So we get 775.16. Okay, try that last one very quickly. Alright, so it would be pi r squared. Diameter is 22, so we know we have to divide it by 11, or divide it by 2 to get 11. And then we multiply by our angle, which is 2 pi over 3, divided by 2 pi. Alright, and then I think from the answers I saw, it looks like most people got like 5,000 something, but we will just make sure. Yep, 5,002. So I need to point out that on number 8, I was putting this into Desmos incorrectly. Here's how I did it the first time, but notice that it wasn't dividing that correctly because what it was doing was dividing by the 2 pi. So you do need to put a parenthesis around the angle that you divide by the 2 pi. So the pi over 6 should be in parentheses. So we do get a different answer on number 8. And also on 15 and 16, I did those incorrectly as well. So let me just make sure that you understand how to put that in. So if I'm going to do that last one, I'm going to put pi and then 11 squared. And then I'm going to put this in parentheses. There's another way to do it, but it's possible that putting it in parentheses just helps make it make sense. And then divide by 2 pi. And then we do get 126 instead of 5,002. And same thing happens here. Just wanted to make sure that you were aware.